What's your I became the monster they created story? The stick hit my ribs hard. Pain shot through my chest and I couldn't breathe. I hit the ground, gasping. The head counselor stood at the edge of the circle, smiling like he was watching his favorite movie. He clapped slowly and said, "Get up, you pathetic little brat. You think you're special? Real warriors don't have attitudes." My lungs burned, but I forced myself up on shaking legs. The bigger kid swung again, and pure terror gave me speed. I blocked it, feeling the wood explode against my forearm. The counselor's face twisted with disgust, and he snarled, "You blocked it. You're not supposed to block it. You're supposed to learn your place." 3 days in the hole. Terror flooded my veins like ice water. I'd heard older kids whisper about the hole, but I thought they were just trying to scare us. They dragged me there that night, throwing me into that concrete tomb. The counselor leaned over the edge, his face a shadow against the stars. He laughed, and it made my skin crawl and said, "This is what happens when you don't follow the warrior code. We break kids like you every summer, turn them into real soldiers who follow orders without question." 3 days down there felt endless. The concrete walls were so close I could touch both sides at once. I learned things about being scared that I never wanted to know, about what some people will do when nobody can see them. When they pulled me out, I felt different. Something inside me had changed, but not the way they wanted. I was angrier now, and I wasn't going to just take it anymore. I started taking pictures with my phone whenever I could, recording the counselors when they bragged about breaking kids. When they made me clean the director's office, I saw contracts with defense contractors, psychological evaluations rating kids on compliance potential. The camps found natural leaders, broke them through systematic abuse, and sold them to military companies as perfect soldiers. They were selling us like cattle. I walked into his office with some of the evidence. Maybe he'd want to stop the abuse. He looked at my photos for 3 seconds, smiled, and said, "Looks like normal training to me. Maybe you should focus on following orders instead of making up stories." He threw me back in the hole for disturbing camp operations. I called my mom. They said phones were broken. The director called her himself, told her lies. She said over one supervised call that she was proud of how much stronger I was getting. I got hold of a phone and called the state's child services hotline. The caseworker said they'd look into it but needed more evidence and parental permission to investigate. When I mentioned my mom supported the camp, she hung up. That's when I realized nobody was coming to help us. I'd have to handle this myself, and I was going to make them all pay for what they'd done. That night, my hands shook as I planned it out. The head counselor walked the perimeter alone at midnight. I'd heard him tell another counselor that breaking the strong ones was his most important work. "Crush the leaders early," he'd said. I set a small fire as a distraction, then waited in the woods with a survival snare they'd taught us to make. At the narrow trail where trees grew close together, the snare caught him perfectly. It yanked him off his feet and left him hanging upside down. I stood there watching him struggle, and I felt better than I had in months. Finally, I had control over something. I smiled and said, "Remember what you told me about crushing leaders early?" He tried to scream, but I'd gagged him with his own bandana. I didn't kill him. Instead, I left him there with my photos and recordings pinned to his shirt. I wanted the world to see his philosophy in action. I waited until the director was alone, triggered the fire alarm, and slipped through his window. When he came back, I was sitting in his chair. I tied him up using their rope techniques, savoring his growing terror. I whispered, "You're going to call every parent and tell them the truth." He shook his head and said, "You don't understand. This isn't about hurting kids. We identify natural leaders like you and forge you into something greater." I showed him the evidence I'd collected, bank records, contracts, psychological profiles. I said, "You mean you torture kids until they submit? Now you're going to tell everyone exactly what you've been doing." He made every call. I live streamed it all, my hands steady as rocks. I was in control, and it felt incredible. Cars started pulling up in the morning, parents who'd driven through the night, news vans parked outside the gate. The network was finished. Counselors got arrested, contracts got canceled, officials faced investigations. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still wake up thinking about those concrete walls, but I also know that I stopped the people who hurt me and made sure they couldn't hurt anyone else. Sometimes I wonder if what I did was wrong, but then I think about how it felt to finally fight back, and I'm not sorry about any of it.